Forgotten. Chapter 16. Guilt. 2 months later, Sunny Starscout could barely contain her excitement as she stepped out of the Maritime Bay Museum of History for the final time before it would be officially open. The exhibits on all 3 races were ready, and the Guardians of Harmony wing looked positively stunning. As soon as she was determined to go back to Hitch's for a good night's sleep, the excitement only continued to pile on as she was told that repair work on the lighthouse was officially complete, and that she could move back in at any time. So as the preparations for tomorrow's reopening was finally complete, she now headed back towards the lighthouse at almost a full gallop, eager to see what it had looked like. She had kept herself so busy at the museum that she hadn't really made any time to go check on construction progress the past few months. She got to the town's outer streets and her breath left her in a gasp as she came over to the crest of the first hill and saw what had been done. She was sure that there were some details that would go unnoticed under the clear night sky, but the first thing that she had noticed was the light at the top was fully functional again, and cast out a brilliant beam of light out to the sea. She trotted up the path and found the moon bright enough to notice the fresh coat of paint on everything. It probably looked brand new in the light of day. She came up to the front door and dug her house key out of her saddlebag and brought it up to the doorknob, but found that it didn't go in, and it made her realize that they likely went with brand new locks as well.
Looks like tonight isn't over yet,
Sunny surmised, guessing that they probably dropped the key off at her temporary address, which was Hitch's place. She turned and trotted back down the hill, and saw another pony come over the hill, and they met in the middle before Sunny finally recognized him in the moonlight.
Oh, Sprout!
She greeted.
Hey, Sunny. The construction foreman couldn't find you, so he gave the key to Hitch. He said I should bring it by so you didn't have to walk all the way back into town. Here,
Sprout said, tossing the metal key, ring, and tag over to the mare, who definitely caught it in her right hoof.
Thanks,
Sunny told him, giving him a smile.
So, yeah, see ya,
Sprout replied, turning quickly to head back down the path.
Hey, not so fast,
Sunny called after him, causing him to pause in his trot.
I haven't seen you in months. It almost feels like that we've been avoiding each other. How have you been, Sprout?
Sunny asked, taking a few steps towards him. The red earth pony slowly turned around, his ears low.
I mean, as well as I can be, I guess. I keep reminding myself how lucky I am to sell out my job with Hitch, instead of having to take something at counter logic, staring at a conveyor belt for hours on end. Sunny noticed how Sprout wasn't making eye contact and was just poking at the ground with his left hoof anxiously. Hitch just said that you've turned over a new leaf, and how much of an improvement that you've been making.
Sprout nodded softly, again avoiding her gaze.
Look, I know you have that museum opening in the morning, so I won't keep you,
Sprout said again, trying to excuse himself, but only got halfway turned around before Sunny spoke up again. He realized it wasn't going to be that easy.
Sprout, wait.
Sprout turned again, letting out an exasperated sigh.
Look, this isn't going to work, alright? I know you're trying to make nice and act like it's all water under the bridge. Thanks, but you don't know how others look at me now, every single day,
Sprout told her, finally looking her in the eyes, though he had to bite his lip to do so.
Yeah, I do know. That's why I'm doing this. I wanted to see how you're doing, ask if you're okay.
Sunny told him, dropping the key into her saddlebag.
Am I okay? Really? Do you know how hard it is to get out of bed in the morning sometimes? How ashamed I feel every hour of every day now? How can Hitch ever expect me to serve this town when I can't even look at any of them?
He asked.
It's not entirely your fault, Sprout. How can you say that? Of course it is. Not really. You and all of Maritime Bay were a product of your surroundings. We took the same classes, read the same history books. And you're the only one who didn't turn into a paranoid, constantly frightened moron. You know why? Your dad. You listened to him, and no pony else did. That's not a very good excuse for the rest of us. But it is a reason, Sprout. Yeah, I listened to my dad and his research, but do you know how often I felt like doubting him and I got tempted to just go with the flow? More than you might think. Really?
Sprout asked, and Sunny nodded immediately.
I also know that it can be a little frustrating when your life doesn't quite turn out the way that you think it will. I remember you always talking about being sheriff of Maritime Bay. Well, you didn't get it. Hitch did. And you probably have a better idea than anyone of how hard it can be to live and work in the shadow of some pony like that. When you went chasing after me, you saw it as a chance to recapture your dream and maybe didn't know where to stop.
Sunny told him.
That doesn't excuse what I did,
Sprout said matter-of-factly.
I'm not saying it does. Then, what are you saying?
Sprout asked, the frustration becoming more apparent in his voice. Sunny took several more steps towards him.
I'm saying I forgive you, Sprout.
Sunny said, slowly raising her right hoof and offered the stallion a hoof shake. Sprout's eyes widened.
Just like that?
He asked, barely above a whisper. Sunny nodded, and he slowly looked down at her outstretched hoof, his breathing slowly quickening. He gritted his teeth and swatted her hoof away, then proceeded to stomp at the ground.
No, that's not fair! You lost your dad, and after this town gave you nothing but grief over beliefs for years, and then I nearly demolished your home! You're supposed to hate me, you can't!
Sonny heard his breaths come to him in unsteady gasps, noticing his ears pinned flat against his head, and saw the tears rapidly accumulating behind his eyelids. He turned to gallop away, but before he could take a single step, he felt himself get turned back around and pulled into a firm but gentle hug.
It's okay, Sprout,
Sonny told him. Sprout shuddered as he felt something squeeze at his chest, and quickly built up to an unbearable pressure as it demanded release. And a release it did in the form of a wailing cry as the burning hot tears finally spilled over. He collapsed to his haunches as he lowered his head and sobbed into Sonny's barrel.
I'm sorry!
He choked out between his guilt-stricken hiccups.
I'm so sorry!
Sonny said nothing more, as he held the Maritime Bay deputy as his shoulders heaved, casting aside the weight that he'd been carrying these past few months, along with the guilt that had been eating him alive inside. They stayed like that for several moments, sitting on the dirt path illuminated only by the moonlight and its reflection in the sea, as it made its nightly journey through the sky. As he began to calm down, Sprout sniffled, then took a deep breath, gently pushing away from the hug.
Thank you, Sonny. For what it's worth, thank you. I won't keep you up any longer. I know you've got a big day tomorrow morning,
Sprout told her, wiping his eyes.
Will you be alright?
She asked.
Yeah.
Sprout answered, nodding and sniffling again.
Yeah, I think I will. Have a good night, Sonny. You too.
Chapter 17. Remembering. Final chapter. Sonny's eyes opened up and saw her ceiling as her 7 a.m. alarm blared out like clockwork. She reached over and shut the alarm off and sat up, stretching as she swung her hind legs over the edge of the bed. Tying her hair in her signature braid, she went over to her closet and pulled out the black cloth vest that served as her uniform for museum curator. Her name tag had been polished last night, and the small buttons featuring the cutie marks of the 6 Guardians had been transferred over, from her saddlebag to all 4 sides of her name tag. She thought about throwing it on and heading out right away, but the museum didn't open up until 10 a.m., and she didn't need to be there for final checks until 9, so she had a bit of time to play with. Putting a hoof to her chin, she took the vest off the hanger and took it downstairs, laying it over the back of the couch, while she went to the kitchen and preheated the oven while she started to go through her baking supplies. Sonny was nearly overflowing with excitement as she stood in the middle of the Guardians of Harmony wing, refurbished, refilled, and ready for the opening in 5 minutes. Upon stepping into the wing proper, the first thing to grab your attention was the amazing miniature-scale crystal replica of Princess Twilight's castle. Izzy took her arts and crafts very seriously, and took every available reference image in the memory gems to carve and chisel a near-perfect replica of how the castle looked back in its prime. The unicorn was prepped for tomorrow, with notes and facts about it and the surrounding town of Ponyville for curious patrons.
It looks amazing, Izzy. The best unicycling I've ever seen.
Sonny told the unicorn, who stood proudly next to her exhibit.
I'd say it's more unichiseling than unicycling this time around, but I'm glad you like it. I hope everybody else does too.
Izzy replied. To the left of the central castle exhibit was the Wonderbolts display, containing 3 Pegasus mannequins. One had the Academy recruit uniform, which was quite simple, covering the barrel and neck of the left mannequin. Next to that was the formal dress uniform, which consisted of a white dress shirt, black necktie, and a dark navy blue coat, with all the manner of ribbons and insignia adorning the chest. Finishing off the mannequin was a pair of aviator shades. Finally, hanging from the ceiling above both of them was the in-flight Pegasus mannequin, fully clad in the Wonderbolts flight uniform. This covered the entire body, legs, hooves, and only had openings for the ears, wings, tail, and muzzle. Completing the uniform was the opaque flight goggles tightly wrapped around the head. Standing next to the exhibit was Zip, clothed in a second dress uniform.
Looking sharp, Captain Storm.
Sonny told her. Zip gave her a smirk.
Gotta say, I could get used to hearing that.
The Pegasus replied. Sonny walked over to the right of the castle model, where an oak and glass display case sat in the open, containing the Journal of Friendship. A gold plaque was mounted on the front of the display, tilting the item inside, thanking the town of Bridlewood as well as Gloomy Sonnet specifically for donating it to the museum. In the back corner, a replica of the crystal wall with Discord's final inscription was lit up on display. She and Mystic had debated it for a few days on whether they should complete Discord's signature on the wall before ultimately deciding against it. Sonny believed patrons should realize that he had written this message with the very last bit of his energy, not lasting enough to finish his name. Pip was currently in the center wing, live streaming with her phone before the doors opened for every pony else, and Hitch was outside on crowd control. Apparently word had got around, and this museum reopening was the biggest event in town. Mystic Cinnamon was currently figuring out the best way to make sure that they didn't bypass the building's occupancy limit. The castle model, Wonderbolt exhibit, and journal display took up the center of the wing, and Counterlogic's new gem projector displays took up the outer walls. The wood and glass display cases weren't needed, as Counterlogic's solution included their own. Each case held 14 crystals safely underneath a macro lens, which positioned itself perfectly above a gem that the museum patrons could select with a simple button panel, mirroring the layout of the gems in the case. Once a button was pressed, the lens moved into place, and the image was sent to a monitor built into the top of the case. A small display below the buttons displayed any information that had been gathered about the memory contained in the gem. There were 16 identical cases ringing out the outer walls of the wing, and Sony had decided to sort them by the guardian that they focused on, providing large cutout art mounted on the walls above the cases to inform patrons of what the cases focused on. From left to right, stills of Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, Rarity, Twilight Sparkle, Pinkie Pie, and Applejack all looked proudly off into the distance.
And that concludes our pre-show of the Maritime Bay Museum of History reopening,
exclaimed Pip, coming back into the guardian's wing with her phone still live.
Again, sorry if you couldn't be in here, as things are looking to be quite lively and crowded today. Check back later, Pipsqueaks, because I'll be doing interviews with donors and museum curators throughout the day. Later!
Pip tapped the record button to stop the feed, then pocketed her phone and turned her attention to Sunny.
Alright, pre-show's done. You ready for this crowd?
She asked the Earth Pony.
I sure hope so. That crowd is more than twice what I was expecting. Wow.
Sunny said, glancing out past the front desk to see Hitch patrolling down the line, making sure every pony was staying orderly.
All right,
came the voice of Mystic Cinnamon as he came out of his back office.
I've done the numbers. We can have 30 patrons to a wing at a time, 30 standing by in admissions, and no more than 120 in the building at any given time. Think we can keep things moving?
Sunny glanced at the exit, where a second semicircle desk has been added up to keep track of the patron count as well as double as a gift shop. 2 stacks of identical books containing 4 dozen new copies of the Journal of Friendship waited to be bought for 5 bits each on the way out, with all proceeds going to the upkeep of the museum.
I think we are, yeah. This is so exciting.
Sunny said, glancing down at her vest, making sure that it was even and making sure that her name tag was level.
All right then, I guess we'll say a few words and we'll start letting them in.
Cinnamon said, walking out of the front area, taking one last look at the clock on the wall, watching the second hand tick over to 10 a.m. With that, he walked out to the front steps as Sunny and Pip waited in the lobby.
Ponies of Maritime Bay and beyond, welcome to the reopening of our Museum of Equestrian History. Please, let me take a moment now and thank the museums in Bridlewood and Zephyr Heights for participating in an exchange of artifacts that had lasted the past few months, and the couriers, several of whom are here today, for getting everything here safely, as we strive to correct our histories and learn more about ourselves and each other as Equestria continues to reunite.
Cinnamon paused to allow for cheering and stomping from the crowd.
My staff and me will admit today's turnout is well above expectations, so it will take time to get all of you through our exhibits. We will give groups enough time to take everything in, and rest assured we will get all of you in here to look at what we have managed to gather. Thank you again, and please enjoy your visit.
With that, he stood aside, and Hitch began to let them file in. Mystic greeted each of them as they passed through the doors, as did Sunny, shaking hooves until she saw a familiar unicorn walk in. She had a light gray coat, a black mane concealing her right eye, a red scarf around her neck, and a scarlet beret around her horn and covering her left ear.
Oh, you must be Gloomy Sonnet. It's so nice to finally meet you.
Sunny said, coming up and hugging the unicorn mare.
I'm glad so many others can see that heirloom now, instead of it collecting dust in an attic.
Gloomy replied.
It's on display in the Guardian's Wing. You have no idea how helpful it was to my research. It was in such good condition that we were able to republish it. In fact...
Sunny paused, quickly going over to the stack of books and taking the top one, coming back over to the unicorn, and offering the book to her.
Compliments of the museum, and with my enormous gratitude. Thank you so much.
Gloomy gave her a smile and accepted the book, and nodded respectfully before putting the book in her saddlebag, and continued on into the central wing, letting the line behind her to continue filing in. Sunny greeted a dozen more ponies as they filed in, and began exploring the central wing, and then she paused again when she saw Sprout Cloverleaf come in, and his gaze immediately met hers, and he smiled as he stepped up to her with a smile.
Good morning, Sunny.
Sprout greeted, shaking his friend's hoof. Sunny smiled back.
I was hoping to see you here today, Sprout. I prepared a little something before coming here today.
Sunny told him, before stepping back to the main desk and returning to him with a platter that got his memory jogging. With a smile, she offered him the platter.
Unicorn cupcake, freshly baked.
What a lovely adventure. And it's not even over yet because there's a sequel for this. If you're interested, I'll link it down in the description. That way you'll be able to see more of the author's unforgettable work. Speaking of which, let's get on to our unforgettable donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, and Only One Thing. Zar630, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Roland, CrazyClaire557, Stu Hex, Will, Omicron Lyre, Chris, Michael Delaire Moore, Dospel, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, RuneScythe9852, Madman Stan, Leslie Perkett, Drake Lovedragon, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, LineGuy12, Sorcerer Constantine, Hudzaza, Conver, and many more amazing people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.